You probably ate seeds for breakfast today.
Yeah, or like stepped on a few during your morning commute.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you keep a garden, you might occasionally press them into the dirt. But when was the last time you stopped to actually think about what a seed is? I mean, really think about it. You hold this dry, completely inert little pebble in the palm of your hand, you give it some water, and you just kind of expect it to magically become a 10-foot tomato plant.
We completely take that transformation for granted. We really do.
We do.
We treat them like inanimate objects,
Yeah.
like gravel.
Hmm.
But biologically speaking, that tiny little pebble is, well, it's arguably the most sophisticated survival mechanism on the planet. It's an evolutionary masterpiece.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive,
Hmm.
to unpack the sheer engineering marvel of this tiny biological stasis pod.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one.
We are going to explore how seeds allowed plants to literally conquer the earth.
Hmm.
We'll get into the ingenious economic games they play to manipulate animals, the complex chemistry of how they wake up from centuries of sleep.
Which is just wild, by the way.
It really is. And finally, we'll dive into the billions of dollars and the fierce legal battles revolving around who actually owns them today. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really appreciate the gravity of the seed, we have to travel back to a world before they existed.
Right, because plants haven't always had them.
Exactly. Around 468 million years ago, the first land plants evolved, and they reproduced using spores. And, ferns and mosses still do this today.
But spores have a massive limitation, don't they?
Oh, a crippling limitation. Spores are essentially single-celled, they're incredibly fragile, and crucially, they are highly dependent on water.
Like standing water.
Yeah, basically. The reproductive process of a spore-bearing plant actually requires a literal film of liquid water so the male gametes can physically swim to the female structure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if a spore lands somewhere dry, or if there's a sudden drought, that entire genetic lineage is just finished. Because of this, early plants were basically chained to moist environments like swamps and coastlines. Vast stretches of the Earth's interior were just barren rock.
So plants needed a vehicle that could survive the dry land.
Right, they needed to decouple reproduction from liquid water, and that massive upgrade arrived during the late Devonian period. This is roughly 358 to 416 million years ago, with the very first seed-bearing plants, the gymnosperms.
The gymnosperms, which means, what, naked seeds?
Exactly. The word translates to naked seeds. Think of pine cones, right? The seeds develop right out in the open on the bracts, those woody scales of the cones. And it was a total revolution. Plants could finally move inland.
Because they weren't tied to the swamps anymore.
Right. And from there, evolution just kept iterating until we got the angiosperms, the flowering plants, which enclose the seed in an ovary that eventually ripens into a fruit.
Okay, let's look at the actual architecture of these enclosed seeds, because the internal engineering here is just mind-bending to me.
It's incredible.
Right. So every single angiosperm seed consists of 3 genetically distinct parts. First, there's the embryo, which is the actual baby plant formed from a fertilized zygote. Second, there's the seed coat, the testa, I think it's called, which is this heavy armor derived directly from the tissue of the mother plant. And third, there's the endosperm.
Yeah, and the endosperm is just a biological masterclass in resource management. It really is. It is created through a process called double fertilization.
Double fertilization. Okay, how does that work?
So when pollen reaches a flower's ovule, it delivers 2 distinct male gametes. One of those gametes fuses with the egg cell to create the embryo, but the other gamete, it actually bypasses the egg and fuses with a different central cell to form the endosperm.
And the endosperm is like the food supply. Really.
Right, it's a tissue with 3 sets of chromosomes, triploid tissue, that acts as the food supply.
Wait, I want to make sure I'm following the logic of this. Why 2 separate fertilizations? Because older plant lineages, like those gymnosperms we just talked about, they just build a massive nutrient supply inside the seed ahead of time, right?
They do, yeah. Gymnosperms invest massive amounts of metabolic energy into building a food supply for an embryo that doesn't even exist yet.
That seems risky.
It's a huge gamble.
Yeah.
If the pollen never arrives or the seed is never fertilized, the mother plant just wasted months of energy building a packed lunch for nobody.
Oh, I see.
Right, so angiosperms evolved to eliminate that gamble. They wait. They only trigger the synthesis of the endosperm at the exact microsecond the embryo is actually conceived. No fertilization, no wasted energy.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's exactly like a sci-fi cryogenic pod. You've got the heavy armor on the outside, the seed coat. Inside, you have the sleeping occupant, the embryo, totally suspended in time.
Yes, perfectly suspended.
But the built-in nutrient paste, the endosperm, is only synthesized when the occupant actually climbs inside and locks the door. The plant doesn't waste resources building empty, fully stocked stasis pods.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The endosperm is this highly concentrated package of oils, starches, and proteins. It is the literal fuel the astronaut uses to survive the long journey and eventually build his first route.
But, survival as a plant brings up a geographic problem. A stasis pod is completely useless if it just drops directly under the shadow of the parent tree.
Right, because there's no sunlight.
Exactly, there's no sunlight, and the parent tree is already monopolizing all the soil's water. The seed has to escape.
And since plants are rooted to the ground, they have to manipulate the environment to transport their offspring. I mean, the physical adaptations for this are stunning. Take an amokari, dispersal by wind.
Like dandelion hairs.
Yeah, dandelion hairs or the spinning samars of maple trees, those little helicopters. But the extremes of wind dispersal push the absolute limits of physics. Epiphytic orchids, for example, produce the smallest seeds in the world.
How small are we talking?
They measure just 85 micrometers long and weigh 0.81 micrograms.
Wait, really? Less than a single microgram?
Less than a single microgram. They are essentially biological dust. They don't even have an endosperm because the extra weight would ruin their aerodynamics. They simply catch the breeze and float for miles into the upper canopy of the rainforest.
That is wild.
And on the other extreme, you have hydrocary, which is water dispersal. Vines produce these highly buoyant sea beans that drop into rivers, float all the way out to the ocean, ride the currents for months, and then wash up on entirely different continents. Perfectly viable.
But the strategy that completely reframed how I look at nature is zoochory dispersal by animals. Specifically, myrmecochory, which is dispersal by ants. Because I always thought animals eating seeds was just a hazard the plant had to endure, like a total loss.
What's fascinating here is the sheer manipulation involved. Plants that use myrmecochory attach a highly specialized appendage to their seeds called an oleisum.
An oleisum?
Yeah. It's a fleshy, soft structure, absolutely packed with lipids and proteins, and it is chemically irresistible to foraging ants.
So the ant finds the seed, and it's carrying this incredibly calorie-dense snack. The ant grabs a whole package and drags it all the way back to its underground nest.
Right.
Once safely inside the colony, the ants devour the oleisum. But the seed coat itself is way too hard for their mandibles, so they can't eat the actual seed, so they haul the leftover seed to their underground waste pile.
Which is the ultimate botanical nursery. The seed is now protected from surface predators, it's shielded from drying out, and it's literally buried in a mound of ant compost, which is pure fertilizer.
I have to push back on how we normally talk about this, though. We always describe plants as passive. The wind blows them, the river takes them, an ant happens to pick them up. But looking at the oleisum, the plant isn't passive at all.
Not even a little bit.
Right. It's playing a complex economic game. It is manufacturing a highly specific currency to pay for a service. It's essentially paying for an Uber ride to a fertilizer dump, and the currency is just a lipid snack.
They are entirely driving the economy of that forest floor. And we see how vital that currency is when the economic system breaks down.
Oh, like when an invasive species comes in.
Exactly. In South Africa, the Argentine ant was introduced as an invasive species, and it aggressively outcompetes and displaces the native ants. But the Argentine ant doesn't play by the evolutionary rules of the oleisum. They ignore the seeds entirely.
So the Uber drivers all vanish.
Exactly. The Uber drivers vanish.
Yeah.
The seeds just drop directly under the parent plant and rot. As a result, the population of native seedlings like the mimese plant has just plummeted. The plants are producing the currency, but the new workforce completely refuses to accept it.
It's such an incredibly fragile web. But, escaping the parent plant is really only half the battle. Let's say our seed successfully pays for its ride. The native ant drops it in the nutrient-rich waste pile in late November. If it uses that fertilizer to sprout immediately, the winter freeze will just kill it. The seed has to know how to wait.
Right, and this brings us to the difference between quiescence and true dormancy.
Okay, what's the difference?
If a seed is just waiting because it's currently freezing or bone dry outside, that's enforced quiescence. The environment is holding it back. But true dormancy is an internal lockdown.
Like it physically won't sprout even if it could.
Exactly. You could put a dormant seed in a greenhouse with perfect soil, perfect moisture, ideal temperatures, and it will absolutely refuse to grow.
Because nature is incredibly deceptive. I mean, a randomly warm week in February could totally trick a quiescent seed into sprouting, and then bam, a frost in March wipes out the seedling. If a plant's entire genetic line falls for a false spring, that lineage goes extinct.
To prevent that, plants employ a strategy called bet hedging. A single parent plant will actually program its seeds with varying depths of dormancy,
Even from the same plant.
even from the exact same harvest. Some seeds are chemically locked down to wait 1 year, others 2 years, some maybe 5 years. It spreads the generational risk across time, so no single catastrophic weather event can wipe out all the offspring.
The mechanisms they use to lock themselves down are intense, too. There's physical dormancy, where the heavy armor of the seed coat is literally impermeable. Water cannot get in. The coat contains a microscopic water gap that is structurally designed to only rupture under very specific environmental stress.
But waiting carries a huge biological cost. Even in a state of deep stasis, the molecular machinery inside the embryo is slowly degrading.
Right, because nothing lasts forever.
Exactly. Over years in the soil, the seed's DNA accumulates severe damage. Single-strand breaks, double-strand breaks. It's just the inevitable cellular decay of aging.
Which leads to one of the most remarkable things a seed does. When it finally gets the environmental signal to wake up, it doesn't just start growing leaves. It has to fix the decay first.
It's amazing. Before a single cell divides, the seed runs a massive system diagnostic. It deploys specialized enzymes, specifically PIRP, poly-ADP ribose polymerases.
Okay.
Using the metabolic energy stored in the endosperm, these enzymes scour the embryo's entire genome. When they find a break in the DNA helix, they synthesize long chains of molecules to flag the damage and literally stitch the double helix back together.
Hold on, it's repairing its own genetic code in the dark before it even has a root system.
Yes, and if that repair mechanism is overwhelmed by too much damage, the seed intentionally aborts germination and just dies. It's a flawless quality control system.
That's Sleeping Beauty. So what does this all mean? We have this heavily armored pod carrying a sleeping embryo that can repair its own DNA, locked away until the exact right moment. How does it know the moment has arrived? Like, what actually breaks the curse?
Well, it requires extreme environmental triggers. Some seeds require scarification.
Meaning they have to be scratched up.
Yeah, or they have to be swallowed by a rodent and pass through a highly acidic digestive tract. The stomach acid dissolves just enough of the seed coat to allow water to penetrate that water gap. In agriculture, humans actually mimic this by soaking seeds in acid or physically sanding them down.
Other seeds need stratification, right? A prolonged period of moist, freezing temperatures.
Right. They have to physically feel a long winter so their internal chemistry knows that spring has truly arrived. And then there's my personal favorite, pyrogenic germination.
Fire.
Fire. For certain forest species, the intense heat of a wildfire is literally required to physically crack the seed coat. For others, the dormancy is chemical, and the lock is only picked by the presence of specific compounds found in smoke.
Liquid smoke.
Yeah. The evolutionary logic is brilliant, really. The smoke signals to the seed that the towering canopy trees have burned down. There is finally sunlight hitting the forest floor, so now is the time to strike.
The patience involved is just legendary. And there is a documented record holder for this waiting game. A Judean date palm seed was recovered during archaeological excavations at Herod the Great's palace in Israel at the fortress of Masada.
Oh, I know this one.
Yeah, carbon dating placed this single seed at roughly 2,000 years old. It sat in the dirt through the fall of the Roman Empire, the Middle Ages, the Industrial Revolution. And in 2005, scientists provided the right conditions, and it successfully germinated.
It perfectly encapsulates the resilience of that biological stasis pod. But this raises an important question.
Okay, what's that?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we've explored how seeds conquer the natural world, but we really need to look at how they intersect with us. Because human civilization is entirely built on consuming these stasis pods.
We are an endosperm-powered species.
We really are.
The vast majority of global human calories come from seed cereals like wheat, rice, and corn, and legumes like beans and lentils. Our entire agricultural infrastructure is essentially just a machine designed to mass-produce that triploid nutrient paste.
But plants do not surrender their reproductive future willingly. They engage in brutal chemical warfare to protect their embryos from herbivores and humans alike.
They fight dirty. The sources of our calories are often naturally laced with toxins, like Castor beans contain ricin, one of the most potent toxins known to science.
It's terrifying.
A lethal dose for a human is horrifyingly small, just 2 to 8 crushed seeds.
And it extends to the fruits in your own kitchen. The seeds of apples, cherries, peaches, and plums, they all contain amygdalin. When chewed and digested, amygdalin degrades directly into hydrogen cyanide.
Wow.
Even the common kidney bean contains high levels of proteins called lectins. If you eat them raw, they cause severe gastric distress and vomiting. Early humans had to master fire to chemically degrade those lectins through boiling, just to safely access the calories inside.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. We've tracked this journey from dust-sized particles floating on the wind, trying to poison us to protect themselves, to where we are today. The seed is now the foundation of a highly lucrative, heavily locked down intellectual property market.
Yeah, the modern seed is as much an economic and legal entity as it is a biological one. In commercial agriculture, seed vigor is everything. You need maximum viability, rapid germination, and uniform seedling strength.
Right.
To achieve this, agricultural corporations have poured immense capital into genetically optimizing these traits.
And the scale of that optimization is just staggering. In the United States alone, farmers spent $22 billion on seeds in 2018. And that market is remarkably consolidated.
Very consolidated.
Just two massive entities, Dow DuPont and Monsanto, account for 72% of all corn and soybean seed sales in the U.S. A single bag of genetically modified corn seed can average around $270.
Which introduces a deeply complex legal tension over ownership. For the entirety of human agricultural history, the core practice was seed saving.
You just keep some for next year.
Exactly. A farmer harvests their crop, saves the most robust seeds from that yield, and plants them the following spring for free. But modern seed varieties are heavily patented. The corporations that develop them require farmers to sign agreements prohibiting the saving of seeds, compelling them to purchase new stock every single year to recoup the massive research and development costs.
And this tension isn't just theoretical, it's playing out in Supreme Courts right now. Our sources note a major flashpoint that occurred in Kenya in 2025. The High Court of Kenya made a landmark ruling declaring that laws restricting farmers from using, sharing, or selling their own saved seeds were unconstitutional.
It is a profound shift in agricultural law. Development charities like the UK-based KFUD have really highlighted this ruling as a crucial precedent. Their argument is that restrictive seed laws centralize control of the global food supply into the hands of a few giant corporations. KFUD has actually publicly criticized major financial institutions, including the World Bank, arguing that while the bank didn't directly author the Kenya law, it promotes a broader economic framework, or a logic of profit, that prioritizes corporate intellectual property rights over the traditional practices of small-scale farmers.
And we see similar advocacy from groups like Caritas Zambia, raising identical concerns about the World Bank's influence on seed legislation in their country. So you really have this intense global tug of war.
You do.
On one hand, you have billions of dollars necessary to research and develop high-yield, drought-resistant seeds that can feed a rapidly growing global population. And obviously, those companies need to protect their inventions. But on the other hand, you have advocacy groups fighting for seed sovereignty, arguing that the right to save and replant is a fundamental human right.
The seed has totally transitioned from a botanical marvel into a legal battleground.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, whoever controls the seed controls the food supply.
It's incredible to zoom out and look at the entire journey. We started by looking at a piece of dust. From the microscopic epiphytic orchid seed floating into the canopy, all the way to the 25-kilogram coco de mer seed drifting across the ocean.
Oh yeah, those are massive.
Right. These biological vaults masterminded a planetary expansion. They invented currencies to bribe insects. They evolved to survive wildfires and stomach acid. They can sit dormant in the dirt for 2 millennia waiting for the right moment to repair their own DNA. And eventually, they became the calories that built human civilization and the basis of a $22 billion global industry.
They are the ultimate survivors. And yet there is one final detail about their biology that completely reframes everything we've discussed today.
The seed microbiome, this completely blew my mind.
When you hold a seed in your hand, you naturally assume you are looking at a single organism, a solitary baby plant wrapped in a pod. But you aren't.
You were looking at an arc.
Exactly. Seeds harbor a highly diverse, complex community of microorganisms, specific strains of bacteria and fungi. And these microbes are not random contaminants from the dirt. They are actively and intentionally transmitted from the parent plant through the vascular tissue directly into the seed.
It's a living inheritance. The mother plant isn't just packing the stasis pod with an embryo and a nutrient paste. She is packing it with an entire microscopic ecosystem designed to establish itself on the seedling's roots and protect it against disease the exact moment it wakes up.
It changes the entire paradigm. It's not a solitary plant waiting in the dark. It's a symbiotic community, a highly curated microbiome, just waiting to be unleashed into the earth.
So the next time you sit down to breakfast or you step on a stray acorn on the sidewalk, remember what you're actually looking at. It's an ancient, heavily armored, genetically self-repairing stasis pod carrying a sleeping astronaut and a microscopic alien ecosystem, just waiting for the perfect moment to conquer the world. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.